I want to welcome you to the Northwest Ohio Association Stewardship and Caring Committee's conversations with Don Hill. If you've had a chance to see the first two videos, I know some of this may be repetitive, but we wanted to make sure that each of the videos could stand alone. Don has been a long time fundraiser and part of stewardship life, many parts of the denomination, and he's been at our association meetings and our conference meeting. And over the last couple of years, we as a committee have had many conversations with him in the hopes that we can connect with him in some pilot programs. COVID, of course, put a bit of a crimp on that. And just some timings in the church year. So almost 2 years ago, our hope of being able to gather some churches together to have more intense consultation and coaching with him have just been put on hold. But these videos are offered in a spirit of love to perhaps wet your whistle, if you will, in terms of being able to address the issue of stewardship, giving in your church with us, perhaps being able to move forward with having Don actually come into the association to work with some of our churches directly. The videos are posted on the Northwest Ohio Association website for your viewing, and we do want to hear back from you regarding their help. Today, if you missed the other introductions, Mike Fauner, who's a member of the committee, Fran Boardman, and Adrian Sundry, and myself, Dave Plant, are here today. Jay Scott, a fifth member, is out in the field of planting. And if you've looked at the previous two, yes, we're all in the same clothing because we're filming these all on the same beautiful Saturday morning in April. And we're just glad Jay's out in that field doing that planting because that means we get to eat this fall. So blessings to him and his work. Our third topic that we wanted to cover in this particular video is fundraising during a crisis, tugging at the heartstrings to open up the purse strings. And it gets back to that issue of mission that we've talked about, I think now twice in the previous two videos. But Fran, you've got the first question for our third video, so go ahead and share it.
Okay, what do you think are the most effective campaigns during a crisis?
Well, I think one of the things that we as fundraisers do is often emphasize vision as being the central motivator for giving. And I think that is in many ways appropriate, but in times of crisis, need becomes paramount. Now we need to think about meeting needs in a context, but the most effective campaigns that I've seen during times of crisis are ones that directly impact large numbers of people. Is one thing to say, for example, that we as a community are committed to there not being hungry people in our community. I mean, I think that's an appropriate vision for us to have. That's defining success in a way that we can measure, that we can work towards in various ways, including, for example, structural barriers to people having nutritious food. Hunger is one of my things, so I've used that as an example very often. But in times of crisis, our dealing with the systemic issues has to take a back seat to meeting the immediate need and feeding people, for example, if there's a crisis of hunger. When I was on the national staff of the United Church of Christ, The most money we raised was during, I think it was Katrina, when people saw real need and responded to it. Now, our hope was to connect that and use that opportunity, if you will, not to be completely mercenary, to talk about some of the inequities that led to the crisis that was there, in addition to the climate things that happened. But the most important thing for us was to meet people where they were and meet their need. So I think impact becomes paramount in times of crisis, and we need to concentrate on those things that impact the lives and the livelihood, if you will, of the most people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, that may address already the second question that we had identified, but perhaps it'd be good to flesh it out just a little bit. Adrian, I think you had the second question, which had some similarity to it, but go ahead and share it, and we'll see whether it's different or not.
Don, we tend to concentrate on need when there is a crisis. And why is that a problem?
Well, I think it's only a problem if we only concentrate on need. Again, I think if we can put that in a larger context and use the opportunity to educate people about the larger issues, I think it is really important to do. I think it's also an opportunity to talk about how our infrastructure over the long term provides for some solutions to the longer term problems that a crisis might indicate. So that, for example, in our National United Church of Christ, our disaster funding is both immediate and provides for longer term support of communities in recovering from whatever the crisis might be. So it's not really a complete problem for us to concentrate on the need, but it needs to be in the context of a solution and a vision for how we as people of faith, respond to the crisis, both in the short and the long term. Does that make sense, Reverend?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Anything to add to that? It seems a little simplistic, but I think it is pretty important. Okay.
Okay. Third question, Mike.
Well, is there a similar application of these truths that apply to fundraising when there is not an immediate crisis?
I think so. I think increasingly people, when we ask them for money, want to know what the impact of their dollars is going to be, which is to some of us a new thing. As Reverend Sunday said earlier, giving is in fact, a response to God's generosity, and so that has been an emphasis for a long time. We are increasingly pairing that with a response that is an active response, a response that speaks to our opportunities and responsibilities as people of faith to have impact in the lives of others. So yeah, I think we've kind of learned from crisis fundraising to talk about fundraising in general in a different way. And I think both for crisis fundraising and for I don't know if there's such a thing as non-crisis fundraising because there's an urgency to all of the work of the church that we need to recognize. But they all have to. Our fundraising programs all have to do some certain things. They have to articulate what the values are that animate our lives and that animate our actions. They need to define success either in the short or the long term and the impact that the dollars that we raise do. They need to talk about a strategy for achieving that success. We also have to humanize fundraising by telling the stories of transformation and success that we've had in the past. And then we have to ask in a way that's appropriate. Those are things that need to happen no matter what our fundraising programs are, the needs that our fundraising programs are designed to meet. So that's what we call the case for support. For David will recognize that from his days in Defiance College. But I think no matter whether it is an immediate crisis or sustainability or long-term problem solving, that's what our fundraising programs need to be about.
Well, things like Katrina, and Katrina is close to my heart because I have two sister-in-laws that both lost houses in Katrina. And that need is immediate, and it's very easy to see that. When we look at long-term planning for, say, something that we're doing inside of our own congregation, is there a way to correlate that immediate need that we see in Katrina to these longer-term goals? How do we put those two together and be effective with that?
Well, I think I agree with you that creating a sense of urgency around achieving justice, let's call it that for just the moment, or achieving sustainable mission is important. And I think the way we do that is by that process that I just talked about. We emphasize our values first of all, and that we as a people of faith believe X. One of the things about Katrina was it wasn't just a need that I think impelled people to give during that crisis, but it was a sense that we as Americans don't allow things like this to happen. Some of the images and some of the things that were happening in New Orleans at that point were things that went against our values and our sense of self. And so that was a factor there too. So emphasizing values, I think, is really important and can create a sense of urgency around this. Defining success, I think, is also a way of doing that, of creating a sense of urgency and focus for these efforts. But the reality is that there is a hierarchy of need, and it will always be easier, I hope, to raise money for someone who doesn't have food today than it is for making sure that our food insecurity systems are dealt with. But connecting the two is how we can perhaps create that sense of urgency. Does that make sense, Mike, or is that off the chart? Yeah.
I think, Don, one of the things that I've always been challenged with actually has its roots in the Older Testament, and that's the context of the tithe, which was seen as the obligation, that's our response that God asks from us. So, if you will, to meet the necessities that exist. And then there was the second tithe, the thank offering for special things, or the offering to meet the unique need that is in front of us. And part of the challenge about the tugging at our heartstrings, let's get up and help out the person of who's struggling and is right in front of us versus the longer term. It seems to me that's partly addressed through that Older Testament model of, we have a responsibility, an obligation, a covenant to give so that things may be sustained. But we also have a responsibility to react to what's right in front of us. And of course, we've moved to even a broader notion that living a whole life of generosity, and what does that look like? And that's much too broad a topic to try to parcel out. but it seems to me that's contained in some of that scriptural witness, that it's a both and, not an either or.
I think that's right, and I'm going to look forward to your book on tithing, David, because I think is one of the things that people are really concerned about. I think we lost our way on tithing, frankly, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this perhaps, when we began to see tithing not as a way of carrying out God's mission, but as an obligation to support, and I keep using this term, a particular institutional form. And when in fact that institutional form often, or sometimes, let me say, doesn't have as its primary objective what we can all agree is God's mission in the world, but has as its primary reason for being its own existence. And we talked about the dichotomy in mission between, creating disciples to go out and have impact in the world, and going out in the world. Even that has issues. When churches become social clubs for the comfort of the people in them, and tithing becomes a way of ensuring the sustainability of that social club, then of course people are going to look askance at tithing, and obligation then becomes, there's a disconnect between the obligation to go out and do God's work and what the church is doing. So yeah, I think tithing is a wonderful thing. I don't think obligation is a bad thing, but what are we obliged to do? I mean, what is that obligation for? And I think that's where the disconnect often comes. Thank you for being theological with us, by the way. I think we need to do that a lot more often when we talk about giving, rather than just, sort of the practicalities of getting it done, which are important. But it needs to be based in a sense of, of who we are as people of faith. That's exactly right.
Well, and for myself, it's a matter of the things we're talking about are not new.
Right.
They are age-old, creation-old contexts, and are having a conversation so bluntly about that may be new to us. But the reality is we've sort of been there before, and we have some guidance that we can turn to and use to undergird us. So
let me just say, and I know we probably need to get off this topic, but tithing is like covenant.
Yes.
Covenant has become a cudgel that we use when people aren't doing what we think they should be doing. So you're not in covenant because you're not doing it the way I think you should be doing it. I think tithing is also, has become that as well. Is it tithing when you give to Habitat for Humanity? Is it tithing? Many pastors will say, no, it's not. That the institutional church is due that 10%, and anything you want to do outside of that is, gravy, but the tithe is mine. How dare you give it to someone else, even if they're doing God's work? So, anyway, I'm sorry. I don't mean to go on that rant. Again, I'll a little bit of trouble for doing that.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. And so I'll get to busy writing that book, so people can trawl over those discussions as well. But we have come to a time for the length we had hoped for each of these videos to stimulate thoughts and stimulate conversations. So Don, we want to thank you, and as we shared in the first two videos, if you've happened to see them already, we're going to have one of these come out every week. This is the third one. There'll now be a fourth and a fifth one. And we do encourage you to share comments with us. Do it on the Northwest Ohio Association website. There'll be contact information there. And we're looking to be able to have Don be part of people's lives in some more ways in the near future. So thank you for your time listening in on this conversation. And we look forward to providing a couple more videos for you, which we're doing on this beautiful Saturday morning in one fell sweep. But right now we're going to give you the camera quiet stare and smile as we pause for 3 seconds until the recording goes off. God bless you all.